In this lesson, we'll take a look at how to smooth our objects and the parameters to do that. So you can see that these grapes here are a little bit chunky, and we need to smooth this knife as well, and the cloth as well, and anything else we'd like to smooth. So the way to do that is you can use the standard Maya way. You can select this and press 3, and it will update. So let's just have a look at that. Just do a region here. So you can see these guys are smoothed and these guys aren't. So if I press 1 here, you can see it's not smoothed. If I press 3, it is smoothed. Okay, so that's with the Maya way, and that means that your objects are going to be smoothed in the viewport as well, and that's generally not used in production because you basically want to have control over some of these parameters in terms of smoothing, and also you don't want your scene to be really heavy. So if you've got a whole city, for example, and you want to smooth most objects, then you don't want that to be seen inside the viewport because it slows down the scene. So what we need to do is we're going to just add a little, we're just going to adjust a little parameter in the shape node, and that will tell Arnold to smooth this at render time. So let's just do it on one of these cheese pieces because it's nice and easy to see. So I'm just going to bring up my Arnold render view here as well on the side, and you can see I'm already in the shape node here. So just make sure you're in the shape node, and then you're going to come down here in the Arnold section and subdivision. Okay, so if you change this to none, this is what it looks like. Just make this a little bit smaller here. There we go. So none looks like this, and then if I turn this on, Catmull Clark, it's going to smooth that out. And what that's going to do, it's going to subdivide this, so it's going to split each face in half, and that's set by this. So if you want it to be split further, you can increase this and make it even smoother. Okay, it's going to become tighter, and it's going to have more polygons. Obviously, the more polygons you have, the slower it is to render. It doesn't affect it too much in this case because it's quite a small object, but just bear that in mind. So you just want the minimum that you need to get the nice smoothing effect that you want. Okay, so I'm just going to put this back down to 1, and we're going to use a diagnostic mode. We're just going to change this to debug shading, and we'll change this to wireframe, which is really cool. So now you can actually see, let's just turn this off for a second, you can actually see the polygons and what you're getting. Okay, so you can see here that this object is smoothed, so it's got more polygons, and you can see that here compared to this one. So it's quite handy to see what's going on here. So if you look at this, you can see it's split each face in half, and then it's smoothed the shape of that. So if I were to change this to linear, you can see it adds the polygons, but it doesn't actually smooth them. Okay, it will smooth the normals, so you can see this normal edge does not appear hard anymore, whereas before, when it was like this, it appears hard. Okay, so that's the type, and most of the time you're going to be using Catmull Clark, of course, because you want it to be smooth. So we don't want to smooth these, so let's just smooth the grapes here. So I'm just going to press 1 on this grape object so that it's not smoothed, and then we'll do it the Arnold way. So I'm selecting the grapes, just change this to Catmull Clark, and there we go. Okay, so it's smoothed once. So I could do this again to this grape object here, but if you're doing multiple objects, let's say you've got 10 different objects, this is a bit of a pain to do each one separately. Now you could use the attribute spreadsheet, which is in Windows, General Editors, Attribute Spreadsheets, Attribute Spreadsheet, sorry, Windows, General Editors. Down here, I've been using the Attribute Editor there, Attribute Spreadsheet. So in here you would look for the parameter, you could type it in here, and then you could adjust it. But instead what we use is an override set. Okay, so that's just simply a Maya set, and what that's going to do is override a bunch of objects at the same time. So if we just select this just going to select this guy and this guy, and I'm just going to create a set. So go to create, set, and then you can go to the options if you want to and rename that. I'm not going to bother right now, so I'm going to say apply. And now we have our set, and it's just got the two objects inside there. Okay, so now we just need to tell that set the thing that we want to change. So if you select it, you can see there's an Arnold section in the set there, and then you can add parameters of the things that you'd like to override. So if you click on add, you've got a bunch of different attributes here that you can override, including Arnold ones. So it's sometimes difficult to know which one you need to override. So the easiest way of doing that is to actually just come in here, open up the script editor here, just press this button here, and then all you do is you just come down here and just change this to none, for example, and you can see that the attribute that's changing is subdivision type or subdiv type. Okay, AI subdiv type, and so we just need to add that to our set. Okay, so I'll just close that up and grab this guy, add, and then come down to AI subdiv type. There we are. Click on add, and then close this up. So now you can see inside the extra attribute section we now have that control. And if I were to just open up the render view here, change this to capital clock, we do need to add a subdivision number as well. So let's add that as well. Just going to add this to, so subdivision iterations. There we go. Let me update the scene. So just update this, update full scene. There we go. Sometimes you need to give it a little nudge. So there we go. So now you can see if I change this to none and then update the scene, you can see it has an effect. Okay. So now you can control multiple objects at the same time, and you can control the amount of times it gets subdivided as well. So I'm just going to turn that on, and let's just change that to something like 2. You can see the difference there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and, so that's how you smooth multiple objects at the same time using override sets. So let's just have a look at the knife here. We're going to smooth that as well. We'll just change that to Catmull Clark and maybe just change this to 2. And let's see what that looks like. There we are. I'm going to change it from the debug shading to disabled. So now you can see the difference there. So I'll just change that back to debug, and we'll have a look at some of these other parameters here. So I'll just change this to wireframe again. You can actually bring up that, mine has disappeared because I crashed in between. So if I show debug shading, I can change this quite easily to shading and then wireframe, whatever I want to. Okay, so if we go to the tablecloth here, and I've just been playing around with it. So if we say none, you can see it's not divided. And then if I change this to Catmull Clark, you can see it's divided. And you can change the iterations here. We just change this to 0, just so you get the same result. So this is what you'd get. Iterations 2, it's smoothing it twice, so you're going to add more polygons, and you can see that. Now typically, if you're using something like a ground plane, you generally want to have more polygons at the front, and then you don't necessarily need to have lots of polygons at the back. So it will save you render time and memory if you do that, especially if you've got displacement applied to your ground there. So Arnold provides ways of optimizing this, and it does this through adaptive metric, this thing here. Okay, so you can actually set in here when it should subdivide. So I'm just going to change this to 3, so you get quite a dense mesh there. And then as you slide this adaptive error up, you can see that it removes polygons. So you can see it's going to subdivide it here, and then it's going to subdivide it less at the back there. Okay, quite sensitive, so if we just maybe bring this down a little bit, see this a bit better. There we go. So I've got it on 0.72, and now you can see these polygons are getting the maximum amount of smoothing, and then these at the back are getting less. Okay, so you've got to be careful with this, because what this can do is, if your camera is moving, this can look like it's popping because it changes while you're moving the camera. So in order to stop that, you can actually use another camera, a different camera, and you can type in the name here, and that camera can be kind of in the same position, maybe the start position or the end position, and then you can just put that name in here. Okay, so it will use that for dicing. Dicing is when it splits this polygon up into sub-polygons. So instead of using the main camera, it will use another camera, and because that camera is not moving, these polygons will not pop. Okay, so that's quite handy there. So that's what that does. And this adaptive metric is in two different forms. You've got edge length and flatness. Okay, so edge length is what you use when you do displacements. So this is measured in pixels. So if you say this changes edge length and you make it bigger, there we go, finally. You can see now it's getting adaptively less there and more there. Okay, this is the one I use most of the time, and this diagnostic view is really handy in terms of seeing what you're getting. So the whole point of this is to get a nice render that looks nice, but it doesn't take ages to render, because it can take ages if you add lots of polygons. The last two parameters here are for UV smoothing, and you've got different ways you can deal with your UVs, whether you smooth them or whether you keep the borders, and whether you just smooth them linearly. These are the same parameters that are in your regular Maya smoothing. Okay. Then you've got smooth tangents, and this is a really handy little tick box. If you've got anisotropic highlights, things like brushed metal, for example, and you've got long, thin highlights, sometimes they can appear a little bit steppy. If you turn this on, they're going to be nice and smooth. Okay. That's quite a nice little tip there, because sometimes you're doing product renders and you can't get rid of this kind of stepping in there, and you've increased the settings on the anti-aliasing, but you still can't get rid of it. This is the thing to turn on. This does use more memory, but it's worth it if you want to get rid of that stepping, of course. So in this case, it's a pretty small scene, so I'm not going to use adaptive. I'm just going to change that right down, and we're going to get the full effect. You can change it to auto if you want to. By the way, auto setting will use edge length if it's displaced and flatness if it's not. Okay. So in this lesson, we've used an override set to smooth our grapes, and we've got our knife. We've also smoothed that, and we've smoothed the tablecloth, and that was using the Arnold parameters here. We've also actually got to smooth the stems here as well. So let's just quickly do that. Just grab the stem here and just add a cat clock to that. Maybe change that to 2, and there we go. So let's save our scene there.